And welcome to the Frogs War podcast, episode 10, which just seems hard to believe at this point. We got 10 episodes, but episode 10 coming to you live right now from Kansas City. This is Patrick McCullough, otherwise known as Fungo Frog, joined as always by Mr. Jamie Plunkett. Jamie, how are you, sir?
What's going on, man? I'm good.
Good, good. Well, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. We unfortunately took, I don't even know, 4-month break, 6-month break between podcasts, which probably wasn't the best idea. But so we've got just an enormous amount of things to talk about. Football stuff going on. Football recruiting has just exploded. Obviously, the baseball season wound up, and there's been a lot of news there. Funny enough, we've got TCU men's basketball in the news. That never happens, but we've got them in the news. There's just an enormous amount to start with, but I think we've got to start with football. That's the topic that everyone's talking about right now. And fall practice, which kicked off a couple of weeks ago now. We've had a couple of scrimmages. They've been practicing, kind of doing a couple of two-a-days, but mostly just daily practice. And there is some news. A couple of guys obviously left the team. Some guys are shifting around. Some guys are getting playing time. Some other guys aren't. So we just kind of wanted to give a brief overview of what's going on. I think the number one thing that it interests me for the most part is how the battle at the quarterback position has been kind of coming about. And there's two schools of thought, of course. Coach Patterson still hasn't committed to a quarterback for the LSU game. He says that both guys are still in competition, both guys being obviously Trevon Boykin and Casey Paul. I have to believe that Casey Paul is the guy, mainly because Gary Patterson really just hasn't talked about him. You never see him talk about Casey Paul this fall. He talks a lot about Trevon Boykin and how good Trevon's been and how much Trevon has grown, but you never hear him talk about Casey. So to me, that means that Casey's probably still the guy, and he probably needs to be the guy. But it's been an interesting battle to kind of watch. Jamie, what have your thoughts been so far this fall in the quarterback battle and some of the other big battles that we've seen kind of start to take shape so far during practice?
Well, I really don't think that there's as big of a quarterback battle as people might perceive there to be just because Patterson hasn't said too much about it. I really do think Paul Hall is going to be the starter come August 31st against LSU. I don't think there's really any question about that right now. But what I do think is that Trevon Boykin has improved so dramatically from last year, especially with his throwing motion. Everybody says he's coming a lot more over the top. He even himself admitted that he was lazy with his throwing mechanics and his practicing of his throwing because he wasn't getting too many reps at the beginning of last season. I just don't think that there's that much of a competition right now, but I do think Boykin's setting up very nicely to be the guy in 2014. And that makes me really happy because he's such a good dual threat.
It's interesting. A lot of guys talk about Tyler Matthews as if he's the 2014 guy. If Trevon Boykin is as good as Gary Patterson is building him up to be, I find it hard to believe that anybody, Tyler Matthews or anybody else, is going to unseat Trevon Boykin for his junior and senior season. He held his own as a freshman, has supposedly gotten tremendously better, put another year under his wings. The guy's going to play next year. You'd have to be pretty amazing to unseat him.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, Tyler Matthews would have to do something pretty incredible in order to unseat Boykin for next season. But yeah, I don't see it happening at this point. But we've got over a year until then, so who knows?
Of course, it could be all smoke and mirrors, and Boykin could really just be awful, and Gary Patterson's trying to just throw everybody off the scent, right? There's always that factor. You
never know what Gary's thinking. So,
well, we know what he was thinking when it came to losing some players, and football team managed to lose two starters, one on the offense and one on the defense within about a week, I believe it was. First up, and we'll talk about this guy first, and then we'll go to the next one, Tayo Fabulajay, the transfer from BYU a couple of years ago, who started at left tackle pretty much all of the 2012 season, left TCU. I believe they announced he was leaving during reporting day or the day after. Gary came out and said it had to do with family issues, and he just had some stuff going on in his life that he couldn't deal with. Since then, he's come out and given an interview that says basically, yeah, I had some stuff going on, I couldn't handle it anymore, but I'm looking to get back to Provo. I'm looking to get back to BYU. Whether he's going to play football or not, we don't know, but he does look like he's going to try to reapply to BYU and get in there. But that was a huge blow for the TCU offensive line, which already was a little bit iffy with some depth problems. Well, you lose a starter and you lose your starting left tackle, things would get a little bit more worrisome. Jamie, what was your reaction, not necessarily on why Tayo left, but when you heard the news that he was leaving, What was your first thoughts as to what that's going to mean for the offensive line?
Well, it definitely was a hit to our tackle position just because we are pretty thin. When you look at what tackles on this team have game experience, you're pretty much looking at Aviante Collins at this point as being the most experienced tackle. Um, that being said, when Fabulous was in the game, he got called for a lot of penalties. He got beaten a lot. He jumped a lot before the snap. So it's kind of a win-loss. You're losing a lot of depth and a lot of game experience on the line, but you're also kind of shedding a lot of the reason that you were in first and second and third and longs last year, because he did get beaten a lot, especially in conference play.
The coaches kept trying to move him off of left tackle. I remember at
Mm-hmm.
least 2 or 3 times where or Aviante Collins ended up moving to left tackle for a game or two, and then a little bit for spring practice. They were trying to get Fabulous to right tackle because they wanted him not in such a critical position, but Aviante Collins just couldn't handle it at the time. Well, now he forces that decision, and Collins has moved to left tackle permanently, and now the problem is right tackle and the rest of the offensive line for that matter. The other guy that doesn't have F what do they call it? F1, the top level college experience.
D1.
D1, yeah, D1 is the guy who doesn't have experience but has some experience in other levels is James Dunbar, right? The transfers coming to TCU. He's played some at the JUCO and the lower levels, but he's never played at this level. Is known to be kind of a really strong talent. You just never sure where he's going to fit. And he's had some great issues, so you don't know how reliable it's going to be. But he's a name that's been bandied about a lot around TCU circles as maybe the guy that could step in and replace Fabulous if we need him to.
Yeah, I mean he's one of the clear choices at this point, just because he is the senior and he's got the most game time under his belt. Maybe not at the D1 level, like you said, but he's got the most game under his belt. He's been with this program the longest. But another guy that I think is a sleeping giant at this point is freshman Matt Pryor. We signed him late in the 2013 class. This dude is 6'7", 350 pounds, and if you've seen a picture of him, he's like the slimmest 350 pounds I've ever witnessed in my life. The guy is ridiculously big, and all notes out of camp are saying that he is going to be a total beast. So I'm really looking forward to how quickly Pryor progresses to see if he can't push Dunbar or maybe Halapalavati Vitae. I think I said his name right.
Big V's
For,
got it, yeah.
yeah, Big V. There we go. I'm excited to see if Pryor can push those guys for some time at tackle, and maybe by doing so, kind of makes the line better in that sense.
The thing with the thing you never know with putting a freshman at tackle like we did last year, you're gonna run into problems eventually, and those guys are gonna get better. But I'm thinking about LSU because if TCU's gonna make the national championship game, which may not be a big time possibility, may have a 5% chance, but if you're gonna do it, you got to beat LSU game one, right? So for me, if you're thinking that this team is good enough to make a run, you've got to put your best guy out there. I really would not want to put Pryor at right tackle first game. I could see him mid to late season if we need him to, but if we can get a guy like a Dunbar in or Big V to play right tackle, I think that's going to end up being the best solution, and Pryor can mix it in with the twos. But who knows if he comes on and he's the best guy, and Gary Patterson says he's the best guy to play the position. Okay, well that solves the problem right there. So the other guy, we mentioned two guys left, and most TCU fans know this. Ty O is the number one guy, and then the next guy who left was Joel Hasley. Announced a few days into camp that he was going to go ahead and call it quits. Hasley stating that he was just ready to retire from football. Gary Patterson has come out since then and said it wasn't because he was losing his starting job, wasn't because of grades. He's already got a degree, actually. He's going for another degree in geology, and he just was ready to be done with football. It sparks a lot of emotions around the TCU camp. Some of the emotions I share. Jamie, again, Hasley leaving, you lose your returning linebacker, so now you're going to have to replace two from the 2012 season. What were your thoughts?
Well, it was frustrating. It was frustrating to say the least, just because the guy had worked so hard last year and in the spring to earn a scholarship after being a walk-on player. And he took that scholarship away from the 2014 recruiting class. And that's really frustrating. But that being said, we're losing a guy who was not that great. in passing situations. He was slow. He constantly got beat by slot guys over the middle. Now, he was really, really good against the run. I'll give him that. He knew how to fill a hole, and he knew how to stop a running back at the line of scrimmage. But when you got into conference play, especially the second half of the season, when you were facing a lot of passing teams like Oklahoma, Texas Tech, even Michigan State in the bowl game, even though they're a running team, I saw 2 or 3 times where he just got beaten over the middle by a faster receiver. So when you look at it from that perspective, yes, it's a loss of depth. I think we're okay, though, just because Marcus Mallett got a lot of game experience last year. We've got guys like Paul Dawson that are ready to step in. And, you've got the 2 freshmen, Sammy Douglas and Paul Whitmill, that have been lighting it up so far this summer. And, I don't think that Patterson's going to have any hesitation to throw them into the fire and get them ready to go. And then you've also got guys like Jonathan Anderson that are probably going to be ready to roll come LSU. So the linebacker position doesn't absolutely terrify me just because Hasley's the guy that we lost. If we had lost someone with a little more speed, who was a little more adept at covering the passing game over the middle, that might have freaked me out a little bit more.
Yeah, with the Hasley thing, you wish he would have thought about not playing football sometime after TCU finished their 2012 season, because then hopefully you don't have to offer him a scholarship. You save that 2013 and 2014 scholarship for a recruit, and it's unfortunate, but, no hard feelings. If Gary doesn't mind him leaving, then okay. I don't think I care. And, yeah, you've got some guys who can step in there. Marcus Mallett does appear to have one of the spots locked down. And of the other guys left, Paul Dawson and Jonathan Anderson appear to be the 2 guys that have got the most immediate shot of taking the job. Jonathan Anderson being the kind of freak athlete of the group who doesn't necessarily know all of the schemes very well. And that's what Gary has always said. He'd love for Jonathan Anderson to be the guy because he's got the athleticism. He just doesn't always follow the proper schemes. And if you know Gary Patterson, he's always super picky with his linebackers. And he's not going to have a guy play who's really athletic but doesn't know where to go. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm not tremendously worried about it. I think it's a situation where for TCU that, losing 2 starters in fall camp a year ago was a death trap, and TCU was losing starters last year about this time as well, so we understand the feeling, but they seem deeper this year. And Jamie, correct me if you have a different opinion about this, but at least when we lose Hasley, I thought, okay, we've got 2 or 3 guys I wouldn't mind seeing play, and instead of Hasley. And when we lost Tayo, I thought, he's got some experience, but I really want to see Big V or Dunbar get in there, and I think that might be better. Last year I don't think I had that feeling when guys started dropping, such as Wayman James. This year I felt a little bit better about it. I don't know if you had the same feeling, though.
No, I do. And maybe part of that is because we suffered such attrition last year, we have a lot of sophomores and juniors that are really ready to just step up and roll this year. I don't know. We did have, tied for the youngest team last year. And we have one of the most returning rosters this year out of anybody in the country, I think behind Texas and a couple other schools. And so I think that attrition last year is going to benefit us this year and next year even more so, just because all of those freshmen got so much playing time. But, you never like to see guys walk away early, especially guys that have been contributors on this team in recent seasons. But, you got to say best of luck to you guys. And, I hope they succeed in life. It is frustrating because of the timing. But, yeah, I do feel the same way as you do, Patrick, in that I think we're going to be all right.
Find out. And you know how we know we'll find out is because we got a pretty big game coming up, number 1.
Yes, we do.
August the 31st, TCU LSU Cowboys Stadium. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then you're not a fan. Looking at it right now, LSU's had some injury problems so far in camp. They don't necessarily look like a traditionally incredibly dominant LSU team. They look as athletic as ever, and the defense looks pretty stout, but they don't necessarily look to be totally unbeatable. I get the feeling that if the Frogs play their game, they've got a good chance. But I'm also pretty nervous about it. Going to be a tough environment. I don't know, Jamie. What are your thoughts about LSU? We're still a couple of weeks out, but you got any feelings on that game already?
Well, I'm definitely nervous. I think you'd be crazy not to be nervous when you're playing a team as quality as LSU has been over the last decade. And a Les Miles coach team, it's always going to be slightly wheels off, but they are going to play the game well. I'm interested to see how this offense for LSU produces this year. Not just against TCU in week 1, but as the season progresses with Cam Cameron as their new offensive coordinator, because that guy did a really good job with the Baltimore Ravens, and somehow LSU conned him into moving to Baton Rouge. So I think he'll get a lot more out of Zach Mettenberger and that receiving core than they did last year. That being said, I don't think Mettenberger is as great as all of these LSU fans are trying to tout him as being. So I think that's the biggest thing for this game against TCU August 31st is how does TCU stop LSU? And I think it's gonna come when you load the box and stop the run, whether it's Jeremy Hill or who's the other LSU running back, Blue, or letting the corners, White and Verrett, go one-on-one with those receivers and force Mettenberger to throw the ball. I think that's going to be the key is shutting down the running game and forcing Mettenberger into long passing situations, because I think his weaknesses will be exposed. Apparently his arm has gotten a lot stronger and he can make a ton of throws, but I really want to put that to the test. I want Mettenberger to beat us if we're gonna get beaten in that game.
The defensive game plan is pretty much the same as it was against Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl. It's make them abandon the run. And it's funny when you read opponents' previews of TCU's defense, one of the common things that you hear is people will say, don't abandon the run against the 4-2-5. They'll make you want to abandon the run, but don't do it. Because as soon as you put the ball up in the air, your quarterback is bound to make some poor decisions against schemes that he's not used to seeing. I think TCU's got that exact same game plan against LSU. Force them to abandon the run and let your offense keep you in the game to the point that you have the ability to do that, and the other team has to get out of the run if they're going to try to keep making first downs, get the ball down the field, and score. You're right about Cam Cameron. My thought on that whole situation is that at the end of the day, NFL coaches are coaching with a different level of talent, and I've often wondered as soon as they announced that Cam was coming back, how long it would take him to adjust to coaching college level, I should say adjust to coaching college level quality kids who aren't necessarily the cream of the crop, right? I mean, they've got talent at LSU, but none of it's finished, or hardly any of it's finished out talent. It's a lot of raw talent that he has to spend more time coaching than he does scheming. Not something that he might not be used to doing. So, we'll see what happens. I still think, TCU's about a 4 to 5 point dog, I think, at this point.
Somewhere around there.
It's kind of moved. It was 7. I saw it at 3 when I was in Vegas. I think it's back to 4 or 5 now. And I think that's about right. If we were thinking, most likely situation, LSU wins by a field goal or maybe 2 field goals, I might see that situation if we, sim the game over 100 times. But that doesn't mean that TCU doesn't win a few of those. One thing to note about football before we get into recruiting and some other issues, we talked about this in the blog a little bit. It hasn't been talked about since, and there was a reason for that. But, Gary Patterson was asked a couple of practices ago, so, hey, Devontae Fields, is there any chance he plays against LSU? And if you listen to the audio of the interview, Stephen Stevenson was the one who asked the question. He immediately responded, oh, I don't know. That's his immediate response was, I don't know. He then said, I don't think so. And then went into a 2-sentence long answer that said, well, he's been really embarrassed. He's done all the right things. It's really not up to me. And I'll leave it at that. And what was surprising about it, and the reason that we made a little bit of a story about it was, anytime before fall when you asked Gary Patterson about Devontae Fields, it was, he's been suspended 2 games for a violation of team policy and university rules. It wasn't ever one or the other. Now it appears that he's trying to pull this line of, well, he's in a violation of university rules, and it's up to the university what happens, and he's appealing to the university. And I have no say on what happens. And I read that to mean, well, if he wins the appeal, he's going to play, right? Because if Gary Patterson doesn't want Devontae Fields to play, it doesn't matter if the university is going through an investigation. He's not going to play, right? He's not going to be involved in the game. And it ended up not becoming that much of a story because Gary Patterson, in that interview, also made some comments about how he thought if he was to let his guys vote for Devontae Fields to play or not, they'd let him play, and that's not, teaching a guy a life lesson. And some guys turned that into meaning he was shooting down Les Miles. But, Jamie, I know you saw it. I know you saw what happened there. What are your thoughts about the idea that Devontae Fields, after everything we've heard, could end up playing against LSU? and then talk about the kind of impact you think he'd have on that game.
Well, first things foremost, I don't think there's any way that Fields plays against LSU or Southeastern Louisiana. I just don't. Gary Patterson is not a guy that goes back on discipline. He is not a guy that goes back on his word, and he said for so long that Devontae's suspended for the first 2 games, and he's going to be out for the first 2 games. And so that's what I'm planning mentally in my mind as happening. I don't think Fields is playing, but the comments were a little strange coming from Gary because it did sound like he was kind of going back on the decisions that had previously been made. And I think the way that he phrased it was poor, but here's what I think the current situation is. I think that Fields has paid his dues from a football perspective for any team rule that he's broken. Because when Gary Patterson catches a guy doing something wrong, they're up at 5:30 the next day doing stadium steps. They're up they're running until they puke pretty much every day. They're getting their discipline. And I think when the university rules came into play and it started to become a bigger situation outside of football, that's when the suspension came down. And so now that the appeal is happening and the suspension could be lifted because he could win the appeal, I think that's kind of the place from which Gary Patterson was saying those things. I don't think Fields plays. I really don't. I don't see any way that he plays. As far as Patterson's comments about the team voting and on all that crap, I think that was just an incredibly loaded question from a guy who I really respect at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and I'm going to give him a little benefit of the doubt that maybe it wasn't totally intentional to be that loaded of a question, but coaches don't typically, and Gary Patterson doesn't typically come out and take shots at coaches across the country. He doesn't. And I think he was asked a loaded question about his team voting for Fields to come back, and I think that was spun into, I don't agree with Les Miles allowing the team to vote on Jeremy Hill. I don't think Patterson would let that happen. For the record, you guys read my "this bit is way overblown" piece. You saw the backlash that I caught from a couple of LSU guys talking about Les Miles, but that's neither here nor there. So, I don't think Fields plays. I don't. And so, no.
Let me put it to you this way. The university accepts Fields' request at appealing and drops the suspension. Because he's saying it's a university suspension. So let's say the university drops it, meaning he's eligible to play. Does he play?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I understand what Gary was saying when he says, I don't know, it's not up to me. But in the end, Gary Patterson's going to look at that situation. He's going to look at what would happen if Fields played, and I think he still sits him.
Much more senile than you are. To me, he's absolutely going to play. If the university, because to me, it could have been one of two things. If it was one thing, let's just, I don't mind putting him out there. I mean, if it was an issue of him maybe using a drug that shouldn't be used but isn't on the list technically, I don't think he's going to win that. But let's just say it was more benign than that, and he got an alcohol violation for being in a room of a guy because he had alcohol, something like that, and that got overturned. If I'm Gary Patterson, I look at that situation and say, I did everything I could. The kids learned his lesson. I see that. The university dropped the suspension, and I'm cut loose, and I'm all about winning football games, and I have to let the kid play. I know that Gary Patterson isn't all about winning football games, but to me, he's giving himself an out. I don't think he would have said that he was never. I mean, he was just asked, "Hey, could Devontae Fields play against LSU?" I mean, if you didn't want him to play, the answer is no. No, he's not going to play. But he didn't say that at all. He gave himself 2 or 3 outs, and then he hasn't been asked about it since. So just my feeling on the whole thing is that it's probably a 5% chance that the whole suspension gets lifted by the university. But if it was, I think Gary's thinking, he's learned his lesson. I'll let him go. And we'll see.
I don't know about. I mean, sure, he's giving himself an out, but my question then would be, well, if it's something as minor as an alcohol violation because he was in the dorm, why is he getting suspended 2 games in the first place? Why?
The third time it's happened, yeah.
I mean, if he's a multiple offender, then I get it. But if he's a multiple offender and then it gets appealed and overturned by the university, why are you lifting the 2-game suspension? That's not really teaching him a lesson. That's going down the same road that LSU went with Tyrann Mathieu. There are a lot of questions that I would like answers to that we're obviously not ever going to get. But I don't know. I'm confused by the wording that Patterson used. But I don't think he goes back. I really don't think he goes back. Even if he's presented that opportunity, I know he wants to beat LSU. I know we all want Fields to play against LSU. I mean, if I was asked, do you want Fields to play against LSU? I'd say, hell yes, I want Fields to play against LSU, but he screwed up, and he's got a 2-game suspension, so he's not going to play.
So I separate the question out into two different things. Do I think Gary Patterson should let him play, and do I think Gary Patterson will let him play?
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, I think if the school lifts the suspension, Gary Patterson is going to let him play. But I also think, should he let him play? No. And the reason I think that, and this is the question I have for you, and disagree with me if you want to, I don't think that Devontae Fields is actually going to be that important to the LSU game. He's going to be really important against OU. He's going to be really important against Texas Tech, certainly. Extremely important against almost any Big 12 team, Oklahoma State for that matter. But against a team that's going to be trying to run the ball down our throats all night long and is occasionally going to drop back and pass, it's just me, but does Devontae Fields really even make that much of a difference if he plays in the LSU game? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I think you could look back at times last year where we played teams that were heavy with the run, like Texas and Michigan State in the bowl game, where he did make an impact. Sure, it was on passing downs and on passing plays, but he still had an incredible impact. And I think part of that reason was because of the respect that he has earned over the length of the season to be a threat against the run and the pass. So, if your offensive line is focusing on a guy, regardless of the situation, regardless of the play that's called, it's going to give other guys on the line, it's going to give linebackers opportunities to fill those holes and make stops. So, I do think that he would have an impact on that game simply because he'd be on the field. So, I don't know, that's my 2 cents.
Talk a little bit about recruiting. TCU had a pretty good weekend coming into the last couple of weeks, and that their last commit had come back in June, right? That was Frank Key, the offensive guard, coming from Tyler, Texas, and Tyler Junior College, a guy that TCU's been after forever. Well, he went right back at it and got 2 commitments back-to-back, one on a Friday, one on a Saturday. Outside linebacker Jimmy Swain from Lee Summit, Missouri, 3-star guy who probably will end up being a 3 or 4-star guy when it's all said and done. And then you've got Ty Barrett, offensive lineman from Dallas Skyline, who committed Saturday, just one day later, who had apparently actually committed to TCU roughly a week before that, and he just wanted to wait and give himself a week before he said anything. But 2 major recruits that have taken TCU's 2014 class from being in maybe the 50 range as far as national ranking to about the 30th best class in the nation. And that doesn't mention some of the other high-level recruits that we think are going to be committing in the near future. But, talk a little bit, Jamie, about those 2 guys and what they've kind of meant to the 2014 class and how that class is going to shake out.
Well, I think these are, no offense to the other guys, especially guys like Zakoven Henderson and Foster Sawyer that have already committed to this class of 2014, but I think these are the 2 biggest commits that we've gotten at this point, namely because they are at positions of need. Swain, being an outside linebacker, obviously he's going to come in and add depth immediately. And the same with Ty Barrett. Sure, Barrett is more of a project, I think, than people realize because he is a 4-star guy, but he's going to come in and immediately add some good depth to this team. And so I think that's, from a talent standpoint, why these 2 guys are so important to this class. On a broader scale than just talent, they're actively recruiting other big names. Ty Barrett has said he's already been in contact with guys like Barrett Smith to try and bring them into the fold for the class of 2014. And so I think that's where the real impact is going to shake out, is how these guys attract other recruits to this class. Because if they can do work and they can bring in some other guys and have Zakoven Henderson talking to some guys and really pulling in other big recruits, I think we're going to see this class blow up. Regardless, I think it's a good class so far. I say we add. I mean, we're sitting 7-8 months out from signing day. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11 commits, I believe, right now, and I say we add nine more. I think this is a class of 20 just because we've lost 3 scholarship guys already this year. And I say we go after one more offensive lineman, and then, pretty much whatever we get after that is what we get. We still don't have a running back in this class, so that would be nice to see, and possibly another defensive lineman in this class. But I think we're sitting in a very good position right now because we have depth almost everywhere, and depth that will be returning in 2014.
Yeah, I agree. And as far as the next guys coming up, and we may be breaking a little bit of news here for some Frog fans, but that's what we do here on the Frog Sport podcast, right? We break news.
Always.
The next guy up appears that it may end up being Braden Smith. And if you are just now hearing the name Braden Smith and you probably don't follow TCU recruiting real closely, and that's okay. Not everyone does. Braden Smith is kind of he might end up being the crown jewel of this recruiting class. He's easily regarded as one of the top 5 offensive line prospects in the country. He's on everyone's top, 100 list. He's generally a 4-star prospect across the board. Likely going to play guard, or he could play tackle at the next level because he does have pretty long arms and stands about 6'6" at this point. He's from Kansas, Olathe, which is just outside of Kansas City here where I am. He's really quiet. He's a tremendously quiet guy. He hardly talks at all to the media, I should say. He generally has had a top 3 of Alabama, or top 4 of Alabama, TCU, Texas A&M, and Notre Dame. It's been that way for quite a while. Texas A&M and Notre Dame have come and gone on that equation, but TCU and Alabama have been pretty constant. And here's kind of where we can give you a little bit more news. Apparently, within the last couple of months or so, people around Braden Smith and his family and the high school team have learned that it's really just down to 2 schools. It's Alabama and TCU. And ultimately, it sounds like TCU is the favorite for his family because Braden Smith's sister runs track at TCU and is part of the track and field squad. And she's been here for, I think she's been here for a year now. I think she's going to be a sophomore. So the family's kind of been pulling for TCU. It sounds like there may be some forces pulling for Alabama, possibly a coach or an assistant in his high school program.
Possibly money.
Yeah, well, you never know, right? And we need to get Paul Feinbaum on the show to talk a little bit more about that.
Oh, my gosh.
At the end of the day, what we're hearing is that it sounds like it's pretty much a done deal. If you're talking to his family or you're talking to the friends of the family, that it's almost always been TCU, and that Braden just needed to be convinced that there was nowhere out there that was so much better that he was blown away. It sounds like Alabama put on a pretty good show and is still recruiting him pretty heavily, and it sounds like they probably have someone in his pocket at the program who's talking him into it. But at the end of the day, these guys, in my impression of looking at how recruiting goes, if the mom or the dad or the family says that you need to go to X school, they really often go to that school. It's not too common that these guys don't go to that school, and if they do, you almost always hear about it, right? Mama didn't like that school, and now she's pissed. And for a guy like Braden Smith to end up, going somewhere else, I find it pretty surprising. But if you add him to this class, consensus 4-star guy, consensus top 5, top 10 offensive line prospect of the nation, this class goes from being, pretty good, top 30, to being top 20. Really dynamic talent to add to the mix.
Oh, no doubt. The guy obviously, he's 6'6", 300 pounds coming out of high school. So that he has the frame to play at the Division I level. And just because of what he's been able to do playing high school football up in Kansas against Jimmy Swain, actually, he's obviously one of the top prospects on our board, and he's the number 2, I believe, offensive tackle in the country. So he would be just such an incredible get. And if you think about the impact that he could have bringing other guys here, not only would our offensive line be set, but if he could bring a couple buddies with him, who knows what this class could look like after that happens. That would be incredible. I also want to apologize to him if he's listening, because I know he's a huge TCU fan, for calling him Barrett Smith earlier. Braden, I apologize.
Right. He doesn't listen to the podcast. Let's just be real honest about
it. I was going to email it to him or something.
You know what happens though? and I can tell you just a quick little aside here, funny story. Um, People absolutely, and when I say people, I should say, be more specific, opposing coaches, recruiters, family members who don't want him to go to TCU, that kind of thing, will find this, and they will get him a copy. And I'll give you a quick little funny story. This is relating to baseball, but it's true for any NCAA sport for recruiting. There was a prospect who was going to go for TCU for going to go to TCU for baseball, and on Frogs of War at some point, something had been said about him to the point that said something to the extent of, he's got a lot of talent. We'll see what happens when he gets here. Well, the kid had a raw projectable bat, and, he ended up getting taken by the Angels in like the 20th round or something like that. And the reason he did it, I shit you not, is that Angel Scout went to him and in part told him a story about how these TCU baseball fans didn't think he was that talented, and he should really end up just going to the pros. Now, at the end of the day, he did end up going pro, but the primary selling argument for him to go pro was nothing about, fans don't like him, because the TCU coaching staff can make that argument really easily that, hey, this is just some stupid site, don't pay attention. It did end up being more about grades and, the kid being a little bit worried that he wasn't going to be able to make grades at TCU, and he said, I'll just go to the pros and I'll have fun. No hard feelings. I don't say this to bash the kid at all. But just as an example, I mean, it's just a crazy, crazy world out there that, the people just will pick anything up and use it against you in the recruiting circuits.
Well, then just take this whole last about 5 minutes of audio and light it on fire so no one can ever get a hold of it.
This is definitely getting cut, no doubt about it. So one other guy that we should talk about from the recruiting standpoint is Dakota Allen, and we may end up breaking a little bit of news here as well. But Dakota Allen's from Humble, Texas. He's a linebacker prospect. He's not as high as Braden Smith. He's more in the top 30 linebackers nationwide. It's 3-star right now, could end up being a 4-star. He's kind of had a list it's varied. He's Texas Tech, TCU, Oklahoma, Kansas State. Some others have played in there. As of late, it sounds like it's been down to Oklahoma, TCU, and maybe Texas Tech. Um, we got word. I got word via email a few days ago that Dakota Allen was getting closer and closer to end up making his final choice. And it sounds like he is going to end up likely coming to TCU from that standpoint. What it was told to me was that DeMonte Cross, who recruited him here to TCU, linebackers coach at TCU, went ahead and is pretty much locked him down. And it sounds like Allen told some friends and family that he pretty much knows he wants to go here. He just wants to think about it a little bit more, and then he wants to tell the coaches from those other schools before he makes a decision. And that's fine. We'll see what happens. But he certainly hasn't committed, and just because he commits doesn't mean he's going to stay here. But if you're looking for another name of the next guy who's going to end up coming to TCU, it sounds like Dakota Allen from Humble, Texas. A good chance that he ends up being a Frog.
Well, and just so you know, he actually is going to decide on August 16th. And yeah, like you said, he is apparently at this point a TCU lean, which is always fantastic to hear because he is a linebacker like Jimmy Swain and would add some serious depth again to that position. So would be really, really pumped to see Dakota Allen commit to this class.
It's fun because there is a tremendous amount of stuff going on at all times, right? When you look at recruiting, there's always different things going on during the summer. And for us, there's something else going on during the summer, and that's baseball, right? Summer baseball, tons of fun seeing these kids go out to the Cape League and these different summer leagues to see what they're doing. But the biggest news for TCU baseball has been the coaching staff. And since last time we talked, there's been a lot that's changed for the TCU baseball team. And Jamie, I know you've had fun keeping up with all the TCU baseball news.
Oh, man, totally. I'm all deep into those stats. Stats, man.
So let's kind of go through the history here. Season ends in disgrace.
Patrick goes scorched earth on everybody.
Yeah. Patrick tells all. And we could talk about that later if you want to. If Jamie wants to ask me any questions about that. We never actually talked about that.
We didn't. We haven't had a podcast since that happened. So.
Yeah, we never talk unless there's podcasts.
That's true. I really don't like you at all.
So, and that happened. And then our former TCU baseball player, made his final post of the year, and that was pretty inflammatory. But, at the end of the day, what are the things that we called for? Getting rid of a couple of coaches. Well, what do you know? A couple of coaches left. The Chuck Girolman, who was the assistant or the volunteer assistant coach, ended up leaving the program. I could say, not officially, but I could just tell you that he didn't necessarily leave 100% on his own will. It's not like those guys are high paid at all or on contracts or anything super official like that. But he had other opportunities, and he was told that maybe he should explore those opportunities at this point. And then of Tony Vitello, the other guy who ended up leaving the program to go to Arkansas, where they had a troubled offensive year just like TCU did, and it looks like that they brought him in to be a part-time hitting coach as well as the recruiting coordinator. Um, and the kind of thing that I think everyone who watches TCU baseball could probably draw those conclusions that was going to happen. I could just tell you that it was definitely going to happen. It wasn't just apparent. It was actually definitely always going to happen that, if Vitello had a chance to leave, he probably should do that. And if Girolman had a chance to leave, he should probably do that. And I think that the guys who they ended up getting, we'll talk about them in a minute, ended up being the right guys for the job. But I don't know, Jamie, what was your whole thought about how everything went down? Not necessarily just with the Frogs War stuff, but with everything from the end of the season on.
Well, I mean, I it just this for as bad as TCU athletics was last school year, nothing was more frustrating than watching the baseball team underachieve night after night after night. And when it finally all came to a head, and you wrote that piece, and a lot of stuff came out, and there was a lot of tension with the coaching staff. There was a lot of tension. It felt like at Frogs War. There was a lot of tension just kind of surrounding the entire program. It was really just overall, in one word, frustrating as hell. I guess that's 3 words. Whatever. Don't judge me. Because I knew how much potential this team had, having made a super regional the year before with pretty much an identical team, a younger team even. And then they came in and couldn't hit to save their lives this year, couldn't field to save their lives this year. The pitching was damn good. Starting pitching was damn good. Let's not joke about that. But, just hitting and fielding, it's some of the most basic things. Like, we couldn't move a runner over. We couldn't roll 2 when we needed to. We couldn't just field a ground ball when we desperately needed to. And I think a lot of that did reflect up on coaching, like you talked about previously. And I think a lot of that will be resolved with the new coaches coming in. And so once again, I'm looking forward to what happens this upcoming season with guys that played horribly this year, like Kevin Crone. And now I did have a couple questions for you about some guys that are playing in Summer League this year, one of whom is Kevin Crone, because he's been having a baller summer in his league this year. And obviously you know more about that than I do. But just tell me, what do you think why do you think he's having such a successful summer versus such a bad spring this past season? And how do you think he's going to use what he's doing this summer to improve next year with TCU?
Well, I mean, there's 2 points of view on this, and they're both cynical. One way you could look at it, I guess, would be that, maybe he had such poor coaching advice, and that maybe he had no one helping him adjust as he needed to at the collegiate level, and he just was totally alone, right? And so he just had no ability to know what he should be doing better to fix the situation. And that's kind of gets back to the Tony Vitello and Chuck Girolman issues that we talked about a lot towards the end of the season. But outside of that, and I could make the argument that that's actually not true. Okay, well then you look at the summer and you say, well, there's a reason why he's doing so well. Let's figure out what it is. Well, in the Cape, the guys who are pitching are not pitching to like win that game in the Cape, because it doesn't matter, right? Who cares if your summer league team wins? What matters is getting drafted. So the guys who go to the Cape and pitch are going to be throwing gas. They're just trying to hit top level radar gun readings and show poise and control so that their draft stock goes up next year. And that's just what summer baseball for most pitchers is all about. So, from that standpoint, a lot of people have asked me about Kevin Crone and some of the other guys who have killed it this summer, like Jarek Suter. And, my thought is, well, it's the summer league. They're seeing a lot of fastballs. I don't think anyone has ever um, accused TCU of not being able to hit fastballs. I don't think Kevin Crone has been accused of not being able to hit fastballs. Now, I haven't been on hand to see the kind of pitches he's hitting this summer. If he's hitting slider down, or if he's not swinging at slider down and away, and if he's hitting breaking balls and changeups consistently, then I'm extremely excited, and I'm placing 100% of the blame on the coaching staff. Um, if he's hitting all fastballs early on in the count, right? If he's trying to hit the 0 fastball, great. He still has to learn how to lay off the breaking ball. He still has to learn how to adjust his approach as a hitter, and he probably still has the same kinds of issues that he did, last spring. And there's probably not much to read into it. We won't know until fall practice starts for baseball, but certainly once fall practice starts, we'll have some more information for you, and we'll know. We'll know what's going on.
So you mentioned Jarek Suter as being another guy who's really stepped up this summer, and I do believe that there's a lot of truth behind what you said about the type of pitching that they're seeing this summer. But who specifically in the field, I guess, I don't know how much you've been able to see of these guys that are playing in summer leagues, but who do you think has impressed you the most just in their summer league, and how do you think that's going to impact the team?
Well, I haven't gotten to see anybody. Unfortunately, I live in Kansas, and I wasn't able to make it to Wichita a couple weekends ago for the kind of Summer League World Series that they have here. But I was able to talk with a couple of guys on the team, and a couple of some of the different coach and staff members, I should say. I'll mention two guys. Jarek Suter being one of them. I think he's had a pretty good summer. He's pitched and hit, and he's played pretty well. Some of the lower level guys, Colby Turner got some playing time, which was good, and he started off pretty hot and cooled off down the road. Travis Hennessy ended up playing some, ended up leading the team before he finished his summer season, so that's just something to keep a note of. But the biggest guy that I think, obviously everyone's going to focus on Kevin Crone just because of who he is. The guy that I was looking at was on the pitching staff, and that was Brandon Finnegan, who had a chance to go and pitch for Team USA. Who did incredibly well. The team was something, I think 27-3 or 28-3, something like that. They swept Cuba, which was a huge deal. The first time that's happened. They almost swept Korea, I believe it was, which is also huge. They came within a game of doing that, and he pitched phenomenally for Team USA. There was 3 TCU players on that team. Brandon Finnegan, who was kind of the lead guy. Preston Morrison, who obviously everyone knows, who didn't pitch a ton but did play and pitched okay, I'd say. And then there was Riley Farrell, who also got picked up but didn't end up pitching a whole lot this summer for Team USA. He pitched some for a California team in Santa Barbara and pitched pretty well there. But Brandon Finnegan being the guy that I noticed, just because Brandon Finnegan has always had a big 2014 Major League Baseball draft stock because he throws pretty hard. He throws from the left side. He's gotten better every single time he goes out there. I mean, he seems like he literally grows every single time he gets a chance to pitch. And then this summer, all he did was pitch in the 94 to 98 mile an hour range, was absolutely filthy against a pretty strong caliber of talent across the world. And a lot of scouts got to see him for the first time. A lot of guys other than from the South, it wasn't just Texas regional scouts. You were getting national cross-checkers and some international scouts got eyes on him. And his stock just is soared. His name is everywhere now, both online and offline. You hear a lot of people talking about Brandon Finnegan as being a first-round draft pick next year. I picked that out just because I think he's going to be a really dynamic talent for TCU, but also because I wonder how it's going to affect him. Young kids like this, they go through something like that. Suddenly they go from being just a really good prospect to legitimately having a chance of making millions of dollars. That's a lot of pressure. Not to mention leading TCU back to the promised land, right? No pressure there. So, TCU in the era of BB Core and the ballpark that we play in, with no offense, the manager that we have is going to be a pitching and defense team, and we're going to need to score 3 runs a game to win. And so, for me to look at the bats and say Kevin Crone's doing better, Suter's doing better, Odell didn't play this summer, I can't get too excited about what's going on there until I see the results against a really quality pitching staff that's actually trying to get the guy out. For the pitchers, though, which I think matters, and I think I'm really impressed, and I'm super excited about what this team's going to do. It's really early. You can't guess it to what the pitching staff's going to look like necessarily and what the guys' roles are going to be, but there's a ton of talent that's going to be in camp this fall for TCU, and it's going to be fun to kick it off. But speaking of fall, I guess we got to wrap this thing up by talking a little basketball.
Yeah, we do.
Because we're talking basketball in August. Yeah. And the only reason we're talking
Sports.
basketball in August is because for some reason, and I guess it's not a bad idea, TCU decided to go play a few games in Canada.
Eh?
And the Trent Johnson boys ended up going 1-2 against some random Canadian league college type level talent. Played mostly kind of senior-laden teams who executed really well, shot the three ball pretty well, and didn't necessarily do that well defensively. But we got to see guys like Kaviar Shepard, Brandon Parrish, and Michael Williams for the first time, who kind of are the next generation of TCU basketball talent. And I didn't get to see any of the games, but Jamie, I heard a lot of good things about these guys. It sounds like while they may be raw, we've actually got some talent on this roster.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. The reason they went to Canada, I think, is because this is such a young team, and I think that the extra experience was pretty much needed. I think Trent Johnson recognized that. But let's talk about some of these guys and what they've done so far. First of all, I was most impressed by Devonta Abram, Kean Anderson, and Hudson Price. Hudson Price came in under the radar in this recruiting class because of guys like Kaviar Shepard and Brandon Parrish, who really got all of the attention. But Hudson Price averaged 10 points and 5 boards in those 3 games and shot at a pretty darn good clip doing so. So, I think he's someone that could really push for time at the 3 spot as a freshman, and that would be excellent. But Abram, he was a rebounding machine. He shot free throws really, really well in those 3 games, which is always exciting to see. And as a team, I know it's not great, but TCU did shoot 68% from the free throw line, which is a vast improvement over last year, including in one game they went 14 of 15 from the line. So if they can continue to improve from the free throw line, awesome. I think that's going to be huge moving into the fall. They still have a little trouble with turnovers. They were giving the ball up a lot. They averaged about 16 turnovers a game. Which if you look at turnover averages across the country, it's anywhere from like 12 to 15, 16 a game. So they're kind of at the top end of that average. If they could bring it down a little bit, I think that would be good. And one big player in doing that is Kean Anderson. He had, out of 3 games, he had 5 total turnovers. They all came in one game. So I think that's a sign that he's starting to progress a little bit as far as handling the ball, as far as protecting the possession. But we still need to see a little bit more from him. Who else? Let's see. Charles Hill was pretty sloppy with the ball. But a guy who has always been under the radar, but has been considered, I think, a steal to most TCU fans who really follow basketball, Michael Williams, had, let's just say he got some really good game experience. He turned the ball over 2 times a game, which is not terrible when you consider that he was playing about 20 minutes a game. But I didn't get to see any of these games, so I'm really just going off box scores, but it looks like the ball wasn't in his hands terribly much, simply because he didn't score a lot of points. He didn't have a lot of assists that would, represent the fact that he was running the offense and really running plays. So I think that we still have a lot to see from Michael Williams that we haven't quite seen yet, as well as all of the other freshmen, because we're only 3 games into our Canada League. So, it is good, though, to see them kind of shaking off the rust of the summer, and for Shepard, who didn't play in high school last year, really kind of getting back into the swing of things before you get into your non-conference schedule at the beginning of October. So, we've got a lot to look forward to this year with a young team. And, with Trent Johnson, I think the sky's the limit for these guys. So I'm one guy that's really, really pumped about TCU basketball.
Yeah, and of course, just a reminder to everyone, we will be launching the TCU Basketball Canadian Fantasy League real soon. So just, keep an eye on the site.
It's immediately following our college draft tomorrow night, actually.
Oh, is that tomorrow? Shit.
Yeah, brother.
Damn it. All right. So I think that about wraps it up.
I think we're good, yeah.
I think we're good. I mean, lots of stuff going on, man. We could do the show tomorrow night, and we'd have another hour with the stuff to talk about from TCU football. Just a quick note, if you didn't see it on the main page, we've got a mock draft of the TCU 2 Deep. Lots of changes already within 48 hours, that going up. But TCU's going to have its final fall scrimmage, if you will, this coming Saturday. After that, we're going to know a lot more about how this roster is going to shake out and who's going to be penciled in the 2 Deep. So just keep an eye on Frogs of War. We'll try to keep you guys updated as to what's going on with the team. And there's just a ton of content that we've got planned between now and the season, as well as during the season, just like last year. Every single day, there's going to be tons and tons of stuff that you're going to want to read on the site. And I can't wait to get started. It's going to be a fun year.
Oh my gosh, I'm so pumped.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Well, that's going to wrap it up for the Frogs War podcast in episode 10 here. He is Mr. Jamie Plunkett. Jamie, go ahead and say goodbye to the internet.
Bye, internet.
And I am Patrick McCullough, otherwise known as Fungo Frog. Thanks for checking it out, everybody. We'll see you next time.